My name is Eden Izora, and this is our second episode for our ASMR podcast that still doesn't have a name yet, but calling it just ASMR podcast kind of works for now. Kind of gets the point across. But today we have a very interesting topic and something that I've kind of been a little obsessed with, and that topic, of course, is Gypsy Rose Blanchard. And so what I'm going to do is I will give a little backstory first, just so that anyone who doesn't know or maybe just has seen stuff here and there but doesn't really know the backstory, they can catch up. But I will timestamp this video, so if you want to, of course, you can skip to whatever part you want to. So I will start the backstory where I first heard about Gypsy Rose, which was in 2019. There was I think it was a Hulu series that was created, starring Joey King, the actress, and I don't know, I just saw it come up on my Hulu one day, and I watched it, and oh my god, it was so interesting, but incredibly dark. And yeah, it's complicated because there's no real good guy in the story. At least for me, I was rooting for Gypsy, but she definitely did a lot wrong in the story as well. So that series, of course, was based off of the real story of Gypsy. So basically, she grew up with her mother. I'm kind of watching something right now at the window. I just see like this smoke going down. Like, you know how when airplanes fly, they have like a trail sometimes? I see one of those, but it's going straight down and growing like as it goes. So that's kind of weird. But anyways, so yeah, Gypsy was raised by her mother, Dee Dee, and Gypsy had a lot of medical issues. She was in a wheelchair, and they got a lot of help from charities like Make-A-Wish, and they even got a house given to them and built for them because they lost everything in Hurricane Katrina. And with Gypsy being sick, they kind of used that whenever they had the chance. But as Gypsy got older, her mother continued really just kind of micromanaging her and not allowing her the natural freedom that you should allow your child as they get older and develop and, you know, have natural curiosity about the world. And even if your child does have disabilities, I would imagine you would also still give them freedom in some ways. And apparently a lot of the things that were wrong with Gypsy were actually not wrong at all. Like, she knew that she was able to walk and she didn't need the wheelchair, but since she was very young, her mom would, according to her mom would emotionally manipulate her into using the wheelchair. So apparently she did need the wheelchair at one time for she didn't really need it, but it kind of made sense. She got in a motorcycle accident with her grandfather. I think she was like 7 or 4, I don't know. And she just got a couple scrapes, but her mom wanted her to wear this brace on her leg, and she told her to be in the wheelchair for a week. But I guess the mom liked her being in the wheelchair because she kept making it for longer, and eventually it turned into a permanent thing. And so according to Gypsy, her mom would emotionally manipulate her by treating her nicely when she would use the wheelchair and do whatever, stuff her mom wanted. And then if she wouldn't do it, then her mom would ignore her and be really nice to the cat or whoever else was around, which is kind of that textbook manipulation tactic that a lot of people use because it doesn't look like you're doing anything wrong. You're just being nice to someone else, but you're intentionally doing it to cause distress to your target. But yeah, so Gypsy, of course, was very young, so she would do what her mom wanted, and she learned very young to monitor her mother's states and kind of predict what her mom would want her to do and just do it, as far as pretending and going along with whatever her mom needed, especially when it could get them something, like if they're talking to a charity or whatever. And so throughout the years there was a lot of scamming going on, and Gypsy would help and play the perfect role. But it wasn't that Gypsy was fully in on it, because if her and her mother were equal partners in this crime of scamming, then you would imagine as soon as they were behind closed doors, she'd get out of the wheelchair and be free and do whatever she wanted. But that was not the case. When they were alone at home, her mother would still play into this weird illness thing where she would pretend that Gypsy needed all these various treatments that she didn't. She even made her get a feeding tube at a certain point so she couldn't eat regular food. For most of her main meals, it would just be through the feeding tube, and she would medicate her in different ways so that there would be symptoms, so that when they did go to the doctors, it would actually look like there was something wrong, even though if she just left her alone, she would have been fine. And it got so bad to the point that her mom even had all of her teeth removed. And yeah, it was just really awful. And when you watch it in the show, in the act, it's very emotional and yeah, just really, really messed up. I think a lot of people forget that abuse was not just in those later years, but this was all throughout her life. This was the only way she ever experienced life as she was growing up. So for her, that was her reality. She didn't have the same context that people who were raised in a more normal way would have. But she was very curious, and she would do kind of sneaky things, which I understand because, I was raised in a strict way when I was very young. And I think there's like a saying that says like strict parents make sneaky children or something like that. But it's very true. The more parents cut off communication and make these weird arbitrary rules, the more their children will sneak and go around them and rebel behind their back. And so, of course, like any young person, Gypsy found ways of expanding beyond her mother's bubble. And by the way, her mom did not want her having like friends, and of course, because she was controlling, she wanted her all to herself. And her mom did not want her to have a boyfriend, of course not. And so Gypsy ended up having a fake Facebook account, and she would talk to people online. Eventually, she met this guy named Nick. And Nick, he was a little different. I think people, like maybe his mom, maybe he even said that he was on the spectrum. And he also, according to him, he has split personality disorder. I don't know the official name. Maybe it's DID or something like that. But yeah, he was an interesting guy, right? And he had some dark aspects of him. And Gypsy also had some dark aspects of her. And so they would talk to each other. And eventually, Gypsy asked him for help. She wanted to leave her mother, and she did not feel like there was any other option but to end her, if you know what I mean. And Gypsy thought this because she had already tried to run away before, but her mom went and got her and brought her home. And apparently she chained her to the bed or something and would sleep in bed with her to watch her after that. So yeah, pretty messed up. So yeah, Gypsy asked Nick to help her and her own mother so that they could run away together. And I guess it was 2014 or 2015. Gypsy was 23 years old, and I believe Nick was 22. Which, side note, her mom lied to her about her age and to other people. She would always try to infantilize her and act like she was special needs or something, plus also an actual child or young teenager, as a way to control her and feel that kind of power over her. So Gypsy eventually found some papers that said her real age, which of course, kind of spurred this whole thing. And so yeah, eventually her and Nick did do that. Nick did the dirty work. Gypsy waited in the other room. I'm not gonna say anything as far as anything gross, like details, but it was a very gross way to do it, I guess. I don't know if I'm making it better by explaining it that way, but yeah, I consider it to be a kind of violent and gory way to do something like that, but whatever. So then Nick and Gypsy left, were eventually caught by police because they did some really dumb stuff and posted on the mom's Facebook account, also posted some horrible stuff about ending the mom and R-wording Gypsy, weird stuff. And yeah, basically they left a perfect clear trail for themselves to be caught. And so they were caught. And Nick, because of however he is, he was very honest and forthcoming in the interrogation. And so he kind of just admitted it right away and told the police that yes, he did do what, he was accused of. And basically told them everything they wanted to know. But Gypsy immediately was playing this role and kind of threw Nick under the bus a little bit. I don't know. She was definitely playing a role and pretending like she had nothing to do with whatever. But at the same time, it's like, that is kind of understandable. Because most normal people, if they get caught for a serious crime, they're not going to just immediately admit to it. So, I don't know. Anyways, they both got sentenced after a long trial, whatever. And this was a big story in the news because it was shocking. Gypsy just didn't fit the profile of somebody that would do something like that. And just the whole story with all of the abuse and complicated nature of it, people were drawn to it. And so yeah, eventually they got sentenced, and Gypsy got 10 years and Nick got life without parole. So then in December 2023, which is a couple months ago, Gypsy was released from prison on parole. So she ended up spending 7 years, almost 8 years in prison. So crazy, she was out. Now, the thing about Gypsy is that there was, all of these shows made about her, like The Act, which apparently she wasn't involved with that. Like, I don't think she gave them permission or anything, and she didn't get paid from it. So that was not really in her control at all. And that was a very popular show. So with that, and then Lifetime did a series with her while she was in prison called, I think, Prison Confessions with Gypsy Rose. And there was some other, like, I think there was one called Mommy Dead and Dearest, which is kind of like a true crime type vibe. I didn't watch that one just because I've already watched so much stuff about it. But yeah, people were interested in Gypsy and the story, and so the second she got out of prison, all eyes were on her. My eyes were on her. Not to sound creepy, but everybody was talking about the situation. Wow, it's getting so dark in here. This kind of makes it scary. I might have to turn on a light in a little bit, but we'll see. So yeah, everybody was talking about her, and people had like countdown timers for when she would be released. And apparently while she was in prison, she had married this guy, Ryan Anderson. And so as soon as she got released, there were photographs taken of her with him, like, right away. And so I think like the same day or the same week, she started posting on social media. And of course, everybody was following her and interacting with her. And it was kind of a really exciting time. So yeah, everybody was following her and interacting. And she was just posting lots of interesting stuff. And they were filming a show, the show that's coming out now. Most of the episodes have already been released. I think the last episode is coming out on Monday, in a couple days. And so they were filming that, but of course it wasn't out yet, so us, the general public, we were just seeing Gypsy through her posts on social media. And from what I could tell, everybody loved her. Like, there was a small group of people that really didn't like the fact that she's a murderer, which, like, valid, I get that. But honestly, my gut reaction from, watching the show back in 2019, and then now all these years later, seeing that she was released and seeing her post on Instagram and TikTok, whatever, I was happy for her. Honestly, I didn't feel any type of, there was no problem to me. Like, she was in jail for a really long time, and now she's free. So, that's it. And so, yeah, there was a little bit of drama online, nothing major yet. She made some funny comments. I don't know why she did this, but I think people were giving her husband a hard time because of his looks. And yeah, I don't know, people didn't really like him very much, and she would like respond back to them in comments. And like, she did one where she was like, the D is fire or something. Just really funny kind of cringy stuff that most normal people would not write in comments, especially not people with that many eyes on them. But it was kind of like fun in a way. I think it's kind of fun to have somebody who did not have social media for so long and they get dropped in to this present world because they're kind of acting like, I don't know, it reminds me of how people would act when like Facebook and Instagram first came out, or at least when I first got it in like 2013, 2012, 2011, I don't know. And people would post like the cringiest stuff. Cringy to me, and like you don't think about how other people will perceive it, and maybe sometimes it's TMI, you know? So I found it to be really fun that you would post stuff like that. I think I'm gonna turn the light on now because it's getting so dark. Okay, here we go. Now we have light. Sorry for the kind of bad lighting. I just turned on some of the lamps I have here, but it's not the best. Not the best. But yeah, I will try to start recording a little earlier next time, or at least have a regular setup for the lights. But yeah, going back to our story. So yeah, that kind of brings us to present day. And the present day drama. So I'm just going to kind of talk about it in terms of the Lifetime show, because the timeline gets a little tricky, because in real life we would kind of hear about drama before we would see it on the show. And the show would have like more details and an inside look, but we would see it months later. But yeah. Well, actually, I'll talk about Gypsy's appearances. So right away, right after she got out of jail, pretty quickly she was making appearances and popping up in different parts of the internet, on podcasts. She went on Good Morning America, and yeah, there was just tons of little clips that were going viral of funny interactions she would have. And it's interesting because she went on this podcast with Ryan, her husband, and she brought up the fact that her ex, because apparently there were all these guys sending her letters when she was in jail, and so she had dated this other guy for years named Ken Urker. So she had dated Ken for years. Then he broke up with her, and then she dated Ryan, who she ended up marrying, and that's who, she was married to at that time. So she started bringing Ken up and saying that he was messaging her stepmom and trying to contact her and like trying to weasel his way back into her life. And she was saying like, oh, if you didn't want me then, you don't get me now, that sort of thing. Like my ex, for example, he would always talk bad about the girl he ended up cheating on me with. So, side note. But yeah, that was kind of the vibe it was giving me. Was like, she clearly still wants her ex, but I don't know. So, drama, right? And when the Lifetime show came out, we kind of got to see more behind the scenes of what their conversations were like her and her husband during that time. You know, those first few months that she was out. And behind the scenes, she was also talking about her ex, Ken, a lot. She would bring him up and kind of like mention him to Ryan in a way where she was almost giddy, like she just wanted to talk about Ken. And she would also have private confessionals, like, you know how they do in reality TV, where it's just a producer interviewing the person, whatever, alone. And she would kind of think about Ken out loud and wonder about him. So it was kind of obvious what was starting to happen. So yeah, that was happening. She was kind of like bringing up her ex often and kind of just being curious about him, but simultaneously pretending that, you know, it's his loss, he missed out, I'm with Ryan now, and I'm so happy with him, and that's how it is. Meanwhile, you know, through watching the show, we start to see Ryan's personality more, the more he's on screen. And I'm not gonna lie, Ryan is so annoying. Like, I don't want to be mean, but he has that vibe of like those people where, you know, in high school there would always be like that person who's like, where's my hug at? And they try to get up all in your space and guilt trip you into giving them attention and validating them. And yeah, he reeks of insecurity, and he shows a lot of controlling behavior, which, not to mention, like, I don't know, it is a little weird that any of these guys are reaching out to Gypsy after seeing what they saw in the media of basically this woman who was forced to look and act like a kid and be in a wheelchair, was abused and manipulated for her whole life, and then she murdered somebody, and she kind of talks in a weird baby voice, and they saw all that and they were like, that is hot as fuck, I'm gonna email her right now. Like, that's weird, you know. So already having that context, you kind of are a little suspicious of both of these guys, because yeah, it's just a weird situation. But also it does make you wonder, like, if, you know, I don't know, I don't even want to say that, but like, it seems like maybe Ryan was looking for somebody like that in his life where he could kind of have that same control over them. But obviously that's not a good choice because we all saw what she did to the last person that did that to her. So, but yeah. Also, I think it's just a case of, he is just insecure, and he could see how Gypsy was getting a lot of attention, and she started doing upgrades to the way that she looked, like dyeing her hair, getting her teeth fixed, and getting a nose job. And I think that really also made him kind of freak out internally, because if you're insecure, you're gonna be worried about your partner leaving you once they realize that they can do better.
So yeah, and then also, I'm sure the fact that it's obvious that Gypsy was still in love with her ex, that definitely did not help, right?
So, yeah. But as things progressed, Gypsy's stepmom, because Gypsy's family is kind of involved. Her dad was out of the picture when she was growing up, which sucks, obviously, because if he was a little bit more proactive, he could have stopped this abuse. But it was a tricky situation. Him and her mom got together when they were young. He was underage, by the way. He was 17, and the mom was 23, I think, when they dated. So, and also that kind of lets him off the hook a little bit, But yeah, Gypsy's mom would always try to keep them apart, and she would move away and stuff so that if he really wanted to be in their life, it would have been a lot of work. He would have really had to be going out of his way to do it, and he didn't. But because of the whole situation, while she was in jail, she would talk to her dad occasionally, and his wife, her stepmom, and she has a stepsister as well. And so, actually, I think it's her half-sister, because they have the same dad. So yeah, that's really nice, because she kind of has, like, a new little family now. But her stepmom is kind of a funny lady. Her name's Christy, and it's so obvious that Christy does not like Ryan, which, let's be honest, I get it. Like, I totally get it. But Christy obviously likes Ken. Like, you can just tell when she talks about Ken versus when she talks about Ryan. And so apparently Ken had messaged Christy asking about how Gypsy was doing, and he apparently told her that the real reason he broke up with Gypsy was not because he didn't like the fame. That was the reason he had told Gypsy. But the real reason was because he knew it would not be healthy for her to be in a relationship after her entire life being codependent, and he knew that she needed, time and space to do self-development, which, of course, that sounds like a really good reason, but it also sounds a little too good. Obviously, that is true, that probably it would be good if she could be alone and do self-development, but it's also a little suspicious. Like, I don't know if he really thought that at the time that he broke up with her. But whatever. That's what he told Christy. And Christy told Gypsy that. And that made Gypsy really happy. But she was pretending like she thought that was so disrespectful that he would do that. He doesn't respect her marriage. But you can tell that, like, she is so happy. Because it's obvious. That's the guy she loves. That's the guy that she has always been obsessed with. And that's the guy she wants. So, it's interesting, right? And Gypsy tells Ryan everything. Like, that's one thing about her, is that she kind of almost overshares without thinking about whether or not certain information could be hurtful. She just tells Ryan, whatever. And I think it's because she came from that background where she was forced to keep secrets and forced to not talk about things. And so I think that she really wants to have that open and honest, communication with her husband, but also with the world, with everyone. And that can get her into trouble sometimes because, you have to find the balance. And I totally relate to that, honestly, because I've for sure had times where it's like all or nothing. Either I keep everything to myself or I overshare. And you really want to be in the middle where you share, you're vulnerable, but you do it with discernment, and you think about whether or not what you're about to share is something that will benefit you or hurt you or the people that you love. So, yeah, I totally get that. But it is interesting to watch Gypsy kind of evolve throughout this process of she first hears that Ken is sniffing around, and she slowly warms up to the idea that maybe she could have the one that she really wants, which is Ken. And the more she starts to warm up to this idea, which I think secretly deep down that was always what she fantasized about. She even said that before she got married, she called Ken and told him, and she asked him if she should not get married, and he just said, do whatever you want to do. I don't think you should do it, but you can if you want. And what she wanted was she wanted him to say, don't get married. And if he said that, she wouldn't have. So, it's messy, right? And at that point, when it had kind of warmed up to the point where Gypsy realized, maybe subconsciously, that Ken was now back on the table, back on the playing field, I think that it made her start to realize and notice,
even more than she already was,
all of the little annoying things that Ryan would do. And there was a lot. He was messy, and that was a trigger for her because she grew up in a house that was like a hoarder's house. I guess her mom was a hoarder. And I saw pictures of the house, and it is true. There was stuff everywhere.
And that is a very dramatic way to grow up, because having all of that stuff and clutter, it makes your mind crazy. Like, I feel like it's kind of an invisible kind of abuse, because people don't realize how much that fucks you up. So I totally get why she would be triggered from that.
But yeah, I think it was just suffocating for her because he has all his random stuff everywhere. He's always everywhere. He's always looking over her phone when she's texting. He's always doing like these annoying little questions trying to get her to validate him. And it's funny because in present day, he goes live on TikTok a lot, and he does that same thing where he will ask people a question so that he can feel validated, and he will do a poll so that people will validate him. Like, he cried in one of the episodes last week, and I was watching his live the other day, and he said, "Oh, did you guys see that I cried? Did it touch your heart? Did your heart go out to me when I cried?" And then he did a little poll to find out if people felt bad for him when he cried. So, like, that's kind of his vibe, you know? And in the show, he would do that a lot with Gypsy. He would ask her just annoying questions that a confident person would never ask. And yeah, I don't know. There was lots of little things, but I don't think that if Ken was not in the picture, I don't think that Gypsy would have done what she did, which was eventually she broke up with Ryan, which we all saw coming because, like, I don't know, I don't see them as a good fit for each other at all. The only reason that she would be with him is if she had nobody else, because she does have codependency issues, and the thing about clingy people is that they're always gonna be there. You kind of have to pry them off. So if you have codependency issues and the guy that you really like abandons you, then you're alone, so you're kind of freaking out. And then there's this clingy guy who comes and like grabs on, and you know no matter what he's not going anywhere. So I think that's really the only reason she was with him, was because he was someone and he would just stay no matter what and fill the void even if he was doing it in an incredibly annoying way. And I know I sound insensitive, and I do have empathy for him because I know that sucks, like, to be that sort of person. But, you know, I don't know. I just personally, like, when I watch the show, even though I can see all the things that Gypsy does that are bad, I find her likable, and I do not find Ryan likable. So I am biased because it's hard for me to, like, it's hard for me to empathize with him when it seems like he is holding on to this woman so hard who just wants a breath of air and wants freedom for the first time in her life. And maybe if he hadn't been so clingy in the show like he was, maybe she wouldn't have left him. But she did leave him, which was very messy. It was on the show, and it was very sad, And she moved in with her dad and her stepmom, and it was very interesting. Now, in real life, we know that a short time after her and Ryan broke up, she started hanging out with her ex, Ken, as we all saw coming. And at first she said, no, we're just friends, whatever. But they got matching tattoos, which that kind of was like a slap in the face to Ryan, because a few months before, Ryan and Gypsy had gone to get tattoos. Well, initially just Gypsy was gonna get one, and she got like a random thing, whatever. But then Ryan was saying, like, oh, when are you gonna get a tattoo for me? Because she had gotten a prison tattoo of an R, of a K for Ken on her leg. So Ryan said, like, oh, you got a tattoo for him, like, when are you gonna get one for me? And she was like, maybe in the future. So Ryan did this annoying thing where he got a tattoo of a rose, because, her name is Gypsy Rose. And, the thing about that is that at first glance, it seems sweet, but it's also incredibly manipulative, because it's obvious that he wanted to get the tattoo so that way he would have more leverage, because later he could say, oh, I got a tattoo of you, don't you think maybe you could get one of me? And you got one of your ex, and I have one of you, so ... And that was just another one of those annoying things he would do. So, whatever. But it was funny because then, as Gypsy did not want a tattoo of Ryan, but then the second she was just talking to her ex again, and she said they were just friends, she got matching tattoos with him. So I know Ryan was probably very sad when he saw that. But yeah, so eventually it was so obvious that they were dating that they kind of let people know that they were dating, and yeah, it's very interesting because there's been a lot of other drama online, and I did notice that after the whole breakup happened, a lot of people online were starting to hate Gypsy and like really hate her. Almost every video I would see about Gypsy, everybody in the comments would be saying like really mean things about her. And I don't know, it kind of seemed out of nowhere. Like it was way more people hating her than it was originally. And she also was having drama with people online, other creators. Like this one girl started making all this content about her. But I will say, I've watched a couple of the videos from the haters of her, and those people kind of give me bad vibes. Like, I feel like they're not nice people. Like, I've watched people who are just criticizing her fairly, and they're not trying to bully her, and those videos are fine. But there are these hardcore haters where when you watch their video, you can tell that they just really don't like her, and no matter what she does, they're going to not give her the benefit of the doubt. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't really like that vibe. But yeah. Oh yeah. And now the latest development is all of this has happened, she is working on getting a divorce from Ryan, her husband, and she just announced that she's pregnant, which is really crazy because on the last episode that came out right before she announced, the last episode, which of course was filmed months before, in that episode she had a pregnancy scare with her husband. They were not using protection and something happened, and she was telling the show, like in the little confessional, she said, I don't want to have a kid right now because I wouldn't be able to take care of them in the way that I would want to. I wouldn't be able to, give them enough of my time and focus. And that episode came out, and then like the next day in real life, she announced that she was pregnant. But with her new man, aka her ex, Ken. So, she's pregnant. And yeah, it's very, very interesting. Obviously, that's kind of a crazy choice, but I feel like she low-key wanted to get pregnant, which is a bit of a red flag because, that could be seen as a control tactic. Trying to get pregnant so that you can have that person in your life. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's very interesting. But my opinion on the whole thing is I really like Gypsy. I do think that she is manipulative, but I don't see it as such a awful thing like a lot of the hater people online do. The way that I see it is everybody is manipulative. If you think about it, why do we choose to say one thing and not the other? Like, imagine if you were going to go on a date with somebody, and on your way there, you trip and fall and embarrass yourself, and it's really bad and awful. And then you get to the date, and your date asks, "Oh, like how was your trip here? Did anything happen?" Or maybe they just asked, "How was your day?" You would probably choose to tell them something good about your day and not the embarrassing thing. And so you're presenting a certain narrative that leaves out certain things because you prefer that narrative and not that one. And so some people could call that manipulative, because why are you choosing one story over the other based on how it will benefit you? As long as you're not lying and telling them something that didn't happen, I think that it's very harmless. But aside from that, I also think that manipulation is definitely something that is learned, and because of the way that Gypsy grew up, she had to be paying attention to her mother's mental state and her emotions, and then Gypsy had to cater to those, and she had to avoid saying or doing certain things that would piss her off. For survival, she had to do that to survive. And so old habits die hard, or whatever the saying is. I think that, honestly, I think it's something we all do at a certain level of, like, you have to be careful what you say or do, especially if the consequences can be very bad. So, I don't know. I think people are being a little hard on her. I also think that she's new to the world, the free world and social media and fame. She's extremely famous, and that's a lot of stuff to figure out how to handle and be normal and whatever. And so yeah. Also, another thing is a lot of people don't like the fact that she has a platform and that she's so famous, because she's a murderer, and they don't think a murderer should have that. But you have to keep in mind, the reason that Gypsy has the fame that she has is not because she's a murderer. There are tons of murderers all over the world that don't have that platform. The reason Gypsy is famous is because her story is unique and her story is interesting. People, lots of people, are interested in her story. That's the only reason she's famous. Well, it's that reason plus the fact that she's okay with it. She will go on her reality show. She goes on Instagram. She goes on TikTok. So it's those two things combined that make it possible. It's not because she's a murderer. That is something that is in the story, but not just any murderer is randomly famous. And plus that, you have to think about it, like, if you were in her shoes and millions of people were interested in you and wanted to hear your story and wanted to see your face and wanted to see whatever drama you have going on, you might want to do it too, just to get money and have that fun experience that not everybody gets to have. And to me it makes sense that Gypsy would want that based on, you know, how curious and kind of funny she is. Like, it makes sense that she would want to take advantage of that opportunity. And to be honest, I don't blame her. A lot of things about her story suck, you know, and it sucks, but it is what it is. She's free now. She spent her time in jail, and now she's out. She's doing some wild stuff. It's very, I don't know, I think it's relatable in a funny way because it's so different, and it's something that pretty much nobody else will ever experience exactly what she's gone through. But the funny little things she does and the choices she makes and just being messy and doing all the drama and whatever, I think it's very human, and you know, that doesn't make it right, but I think we can give her a break a little bit. But I don't know, I like her personally, and I'm interested in seeing what her story will continue as, whether or not she will, you know, have more reality shows maybe, or maybe she'll do YouTube more, or maybe it'll all be too much for her and she'll be more private. And plus that, we can't forget about the baby, and that's probably going to make her approach things different than she has been. But I don't know, I wish her the best, and I'm gonna continue watching everybody when they go live on TikTok. I was just watching Ryan, his TikTok live, right before I started recording this. He might still be live, even though I've been recording a really long time, because he goes on there for a long time. But yeah, anyways, so hopefully I've done a good job of explaining this. It was all just off the top of my head, so I don't know. I kind of was explaining it like I would to a friend without knowing every date and every detail specifically. So hopefully you liked it, and hopefully you're not one of those mean people that I see on TikTok all the time saying mean things about Gypsy Rose, because you might not like me and you might say mean things to me because of the fact that I don't hate her. But either way, thank you for watching, thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Next time we will have better lighting and more stable lighting that doesn't change randomly in the video. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to, and I will see you very soon.